Hello everyone, welcome back to MLS Moves. Please make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Once we hit 5,000 subscribers, we'll be celebrating with a special jersey giveaway. 2 lucky subscribers will have the chance to win a jersey of their choosing. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're just joining the fun, this giveaway is our way of saying thank you for your support. So spread the word, hit that subscribe button, and let's reach our goal by the end of July. Now, back to the video. Well, Copa America is finally here. The U.S. has a pretty favorable group stage, but nothing's guaranteed, especially when Gregg Berhalter is your manager. I'm curious to see how far we're going to advance in Copa America in 2024 and just if Gregg Berhalter is going to be able to keep his job. I brought on Adam of Stan USMNT to give his thoughts about how this team is going to perform, where he thinks we're going to finish, and if Gregg Berhalter is actually going to be safe after this tournament, no matter what. Adam, what's up, man? How's it going?
It's good, Will. How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. I couldn't think of a better guest to have on to preview the national team for Copa America. I mean, we're getting close. We're 4 days away from the first match against Bolivia, so I'm excited, but I'm a little cautious.
Yeah, and I think 2 days out from the first match, right? I think Friday is the kickoff I saw, or Saturday?
Tomorrow is the first game between Argentina and Canada.
Oh, tomorrow. Oh, nice. Sweet.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be doing a live stream on that.
Oh,
so I'm
that's right.
excited.
I just saw Tack just tweeted out. He's like driving 6 hours or something like that. That's right.
Yeah,
I did
Atlanta.
Nice.
Exactly. So we have a very easy group stage, right? I'm going to pull up the group stages so we can see all the groups for Copa America. Let me actually pull it up right now. I mean, it would be, we talked about this a little bit off camera. It would be catastrophic if they didn't make it out of this group stage, right?
Right.
So
right.
obviously we have Uruguay, we have Panama, and Bolivia. We're starting off first with Bolivia. That's our first game. Like I said, we play on the 23rd. How are we feeling about that match?
Yeah, I mean, you got to win that game. I mean, I've said this in a couple other places. Like the games the game in here that scares me the most, is Bolivia. Not in turn. Obviously, Uruguay scares me more than Bolivia, but it scares me the most because it's a must win and a should win, right? And these are the exact kind of games that, however you want to frame it, our team takes lightly, our coaches aren't well prepared for. There's a bunch of different framings, but I think we all agree that we've come across teams at this level in the Berhalter era, and we in competitive matches, World Cup qualifiers, right, et cetera, and we haven't performed up to the standard that I think we would all like. And Bolivia is used to sitting in a low block against Brazil and Argentina and South American powers, right? And not successfully often, right? I checked out, what was the friendly they played? They played Colombia, right? And so I checked a little bit of that out, and it didn't look very good. Colombia was kind of cutting through it, but that's not indicative for me of what we're going to do cutting through a low block, because I'm really not sure I've ever seen us cut through a low block. I've seen us win some games where teams low block us, but cut through, I don't know if that's how I would define it. So that one's scary to me, Will. I think we'll get a result. I don't think it'll be as clean as a lot of us would love, but I'm actually kind of okay as long as we get the result there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to pull up a more updated list. I didn't realize that this one was a little, it doesn't have the full teams in it. Let me actually pull it up real quick. But I think that we should beat, like you said, we should beat Bolivia. It's just one of those games where it kind of feels like a trap game, right? You don't want to like overlook them and think, yeah, we're going to win this on cruise control, because that's when you get punched in the mouth and you can lose. And I believe, honestly, Adam, I believe they've got to win 2 games in order to guarantee that I don't think they can afford a draw. I think they have to win 2 games to make sure that they're advancing. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think I think they probably will beat Bolivia, and then Panama kind of scares me too a little bit.
At the end of the day, Bolivia, I think, is, and listen, take FIFA World Rankings with a grain of salt always, but they're the 85th ranked team in FIFA. That's lower than Uzbekistan, Oman, right? Like, we gotta win that game. It's like major red flags if it's like Jamaica style, or even Uzbekistan style, which I think was like a 1-0 lead until 90th minute. it's just more red flags for me of like, are we growing? Are we developing? And so I'd love to see us just play a more fluid style, play lineups that make more sense when you're going to have to break down a low block, right? And so coherent stuff, which, Gregg is kind of off and on with, right? We saw that in the last set of friendlies where to me it was just very, hot, cold in terms of, how we're going to set up our team. You mentioned Panama. Yeah. Panama scares me because they're like known, right? They're not going to be scared of us. Those guys have played against us. They've lost to us. They beat us at home a couple years back, right? They're not going to be scared. And that scares me the most. From what I've heard, they're playing a little bit more open, which I don't know if that makes a ton of sense against us at home. I hope they do. I hope they're not going to sit back in a block. I think if they play us open, I don't have a ton of concerns in that game. But once again, if them and Bolivia low block us, it's kind of a, anything can happen from the history of this team under this coach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I, I I think that Uruguay is really the only scary team in this group, and I don't think anybody's expecting us to beat Uruguay. I mean, I think there's maybe a possibility I think Tack had said recently on one of his episodes that Gregg Berhalter's signature games are draws, right? That's his
Right.
signature games.
That's it.
And his record against top 25 ranked, maybe it's top 20 FIFA ranked clubs is national teams is terrible. I think he's only got like 4 wins, and how many of those are Mexico? I think
Right.
that's probably
4
inflated a
or
lot.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a lot inflated by Mexico. But yeah, okay. Here's the question I have for you: which player has to step up to make sure we get out of this group stage? Who's one player that you think has to step up to make sure we get out of this group stage?
Yeah, I think that I'm anticipating Panama still low blocking us. Maybe they're going to be a little bit more aggressive and not quite as parked as Bolivia will be. But getting out of the group, you said it right. Getting out of the group doesn't really have to do with beating Uruguay. I think we can kind of get into that discussion and then hopefully the meaning of that game. But Bolivia, Panama are the two that really matter if we want to move on. To do that, I think we're going to have somebody who's able to create some chances that aren't spamming crosses, right? I don't think maybe we get lucky and a spammed cross works out, but I wouldn't rely on that. So I think the key guy for me, and it also kind of we have to come back to the manager a little bit too in terms of how he's going to deploy him is Gio Reyna, because I think Gio can be the guy that if you remember, we never really saw Gio play against in World Cup qualifying against the teams that low blocked us, right? Because he was hurt pretty much the whole time, and he came back at the end and had some flash moments against some teams, and he was never really deployed in the middle of the field. He was more deployed, in that era as a right winger and didn't really have quite the same positioning on the field to unlock things. But Gio's the guy to me that, like, if we play him there, we saw a little bit of it again in that Jamaica game. I thought the second half of Jamaica earlier this year was kind of a flash of what he can do. He created a lot of chances, and I know we didn't really score until extra time, but he's the guy who was unlocking things. In extra time, he was unlocking things. And Jamaica for sure was mid to low blocking us, right? For especially in that second half. So, yeah, he's my guy. I mean, Pulisic you can always say, but he's my guy. Who's yours, Will? Who do you have on that?
I think we have to have a striker step up. We've got to have a guy who can score goals. Is it Ballo? Is it Pepe? I don't know, but one of these guys has got to be able to find the back of the net. You're just not going to be able to win one of these tournaments if you can't have a striker contribute.
Yeah.
And I think both of them have been underwhelming for a while now. I mean, Pepe, when he started that game against Brazil, the first half, I mean, did you even notice him? He did nothing the first half. He was like a ghost out there. I mean, literally, if you told me he was on the field, I would have believed you because I didn't see anything the whole game. And I know that might sound like an easy answer because a lot of teams don't have a star striker or whatever, and they don't have consistent goal scorers. And I'm not even saying they have to be a star, but damn, they've got to score at least some goals, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Ballo and Pepe didn't score one goal in either game, against Colombia, or I mean, now we got dog walked against Colombia, right? We lost 5-1. We weren't scoring goals at all in that game, but you need your striker to be able to score, right? And Josie Altidore, classic name, obviously was very big part of the 2010 to 2014 run of the national team. He was talented. What was his big issue though? He always got injured. But when he played, he had some really good runs, and the team really thrived when he was scoring and he was playing well. We need Pepe, we need Ballo to step up in a big way. And I like what you said about Gio, right? A lot of people, and I'm in this camp too. I think Gio is the most talented player we've ever produced. Yeah, Pulisic's better right now. Pulisic's a finished product. He's 26 years old. Gio is what, 21 years old? So he hasn't, this is like the crunch time where he really needs to show what he's made of, right? This is it. This is when we're gonna know what he's gonna be as a player. But man, the strikers have got to step up, Adam. We got to get some goals, man.
Well, I totally agree with you. And I'll just say this, and it kind of comes back to the, I think, ever ending conversation that we're having, on Twitter and a lot of other spaces between the two sides, of the USMNT fan base, which is like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? What came first, the manager and the tactics or the striker performance? And I'll just say this. I did a thread about this. Maybe I'll update the thread and put it out here in the next couple of days because we've got some more data. But I did it, I feel like last year, like after the World Cup, after the Nations League, etc. And it was basically saying, hey, in the Triple G era, what does a striker performance look like? And it is really low. And I compared it. I went and did a bunch of other national teams in the same run, and I did percentage of goals scored by the nines. And it's so low for us. And I think you can definitely conclude there, very rightfully so. And I'm not even going to fight that hard against it. You could rightfully conclude, well, our strikers haven't been great. It's a big pool of guys that are just meh and not really scoring a lot for club, right? Especially in that era. So yeah, our strikers probably aren't going to be the best scorers. I think that's a fair argument. But I think when I watch it tactically, I think that Gregg really likes to use his striker traditionally, right, as somebody, the way he used Sargent, the way he used Ferreira, as somebody who's going to drop into midfield a little bit more, connect play a little bit more, right? Be kind of that centerpiece between the three-man midfield, right, in the 4-3-3, and the wing attackers and the wing backs, right? And I don't think that works with Pepe, and I don't think that works with Ballo. I don't think that fits either of their skill sets. I think it's nice with Sargent. I think it fits his skill set nicely. Certainly nice with Jesus. But this comes back to the now 5-year, 6-year long question I've had, which is, can we flex tactics to fit our personnel correctly? Can we flex tactics to fit our opponents correctly? And to me, getting our strikers to be successful, there's a chain of events that has to happen there that to me includes moving Gio into optimal positions, which we haven't seen over the last few games. We've seen him more set back, playing more of a regista role in the midfield, and putting somebody like McKinney a little bit more advanced, who just isn't going to connect play in the same way that Gio does. Because I think that unlocks the striker performance in a lot of ways. I think if you have a guy who can connect the pieces, and when you really think back to that Haji goal came off a Gio pass, right? I'm just thinking of like some of the bigger goals we've seen in the last couple months. And, a lot of those are like, strikers need service. And I know that's redundant and overset. Like strikers need service, and strikers need, to be, a really good striker is, they are a cog in a wheel, and that wheel starts turning long before the ball gets to them. So it's very hard for me to even judge that Pepe performance, right? Or the Ballo performances with full context without, also speaking to, well, how well are we creating chances on the whole, right? The Brazil game, we actually were getting the ball pretty, well advanced often, and our strikers were still pretty non-existent. So I see both sides there, Will, but I think your point is well taken. Like, if we're not getting goals from the nines, it puts a lot of pressure on other positions, which traditionally aren't going to provide you as many goals.
Exactly. And we'll get to Gregg a little bit later, but I think that a good manager makes his system fit to his players, not make the players fit to his system. And I
For
don't
sure.
think he does a good job of like trying to enhance these guys by playing them in spots to give them the best chance. You brought up a good point about Josh Sargent and Jesus Ferreira, right? That they are more of like a false nine, right? They're playmaking. They're not even really a striker. They're more like a playmaker that's kind of playing like, like you said, a little bit further back and playing deeper. But if that's the case, it's just like you're setting these guys up to fail. Ballo and Pepe, like they're like we both know they're not that type of player. They're true number nines. They're goal scorers, right? So Greg has got to put these guys in better spots to succeed. And we have, I mean, we have service. Like the guys are talented enough. Pulisic, McKinney, Reyna, these guys are good enough to get the ball and set these guys up to score. But like you said, it's just the formation, the tactics we're playing isn't really doing that. The cog in the wheel is kind of stuck right now. It's not really free flowing and not doing its job. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the back four, right? Now, Tim Ream is close to retirement age, right? You know, he's 37 years old, but he had a pretty good game against Brazil, right? No complaints with what he did against Brazil. Now, Colombia was a disaster. Are we going to get Colombia Ream or are we going to get Brazil Ream, right? When you're that age, you just really never know what you're going to get game to game.
Yeah,
And
that's a good question, right? And it's what who's he going to be day in day out is probably going to dictate a lot of our success, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he, I mean, it honestly it is a little sad. Like I'm not saying Tim Ream's a bad player. I think he's very good. Well, at least he would be. He was a couple years ago. I think it's an indictment on the team or our team that he's still having to start at 37 years old. We don't have someone else who could come in. What about Cameron Carter Vickers? Obviously, there's a lot of people that wanted John Brooks to get called up. That's never going to happen. That bridge has been burned. Or even Miles Robinson. Right now, you and I have talked on the phone about this. There's a lot of hate about saying playing MLS players. Right. I don't give a damn what league you're playing in. I care more about what form you're playing in. I don't care if you're in the Premier League if you're playing like ass. But if you're in the MLS and you're the best defender in the league, shouldn't that matter? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that Miles Robinson should be starting right now, but I think there's an argument to him possibly starting right now, or maybe of playing one of those two matches, right?
Yeah, I think it's a fair shout at this point because I think when you get to once again, it comes down to tactics and what we're trying to do, right? If we're trying to play out of the back, which it seems like we're pretty committed to, right? Or if we're in one of those games with a low block, maybe Miles isn't the guy, in all honesty, right? Maybe we are going to go with guys who are a little bit better with their feet because we're not necessarily going to need to, have to be defending for our lives. In a game like, the Uruguay game, right? Maybe Miles is a little bit of a better option at that spot, because we are going to be on the back foot a little bit more. We are going to be defending a little bit more. And that certainly is what he's better at. But once again, if we're committed to playing out of the back, I mean, we played out of the back against Brazil, I'll be honest, Miles scares me, right? Like so does CCV after that performance we saw against Colombia. Like those guys scare me, right? I think Richards and Ream are the two guys that we have who can play out of the back. And so if that really is going to be our tactics dogmatically, then, once again, you're kind of pigeonholed into playing certain players if you're going to be dogmatic with your tactics, or you're going to play the wrong guys in the wrong system and it's going to be all out of whack. And to me, that's what we've seen at the 9, right? I think we're playing guys with a different skill set at the 9 and we're trying to maybe force feed them into, doing something that they're not good at. And I think we've done that with center back a lot, honestly. I really, I think when you have a guy like Walker Zimmerman, right, who, with all the hate he got, right? And I was a guy who, continually, I think I'm probably lean more, if you split it in half to like pro MLS homer and, Euro snob, right? If that's the two halves, right? I think it's more complex than that personally. But if those are the two halves, people would probably say I lean more toward the Euro snob side of the spectrum, right? And as a, Euro snob side of the spectrum, I was continually saying, no, Walker's putting in good performances, guys. And a lot of the people on that side are like, you're insane. Like, oh my God. And I'm like, no, he's putting in good performances, man. Like, I don't understand how we can say he's not. I'm like, but he's not able to play with his feet. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you are just judging him playing with his feet, he's mediocre, right? But if you're judging the holistic piece of it, Walker was good last cycle for us. But I thought at times we put him in bad positions, right? It's like taking a non-shooter in basketball and saying, we want you to be the spot up guy in the corner. Well, that's not going to be successful if it's a guy who's a better slasher or finisher around the rim. That's stupid utilization of a player. And it's the same thing for me. If you're going to play, Miles, you're going to play CCV, you're going to play Walker, and we're going to get pressed, right? Which we are in this tourney. And you're going to say, hey, we're playing out of the back, guys. Like, it's going to lead to some iffy moments, which is what we saw in that Columbia game. We saw some iffy moments out of the back. So, yeah, I'll say this one last thing about Reem before I'll turn it back and get your thoughts. Like, Reem is a guy who I never imagined being good in the World Cup, even a couple years back. And he was awesome. And he's certainly not a guy that I thought even 2 years after the World Cup, we'd still need to be leaning on. But there's a reason why we need to lean on him. And it's because, one, the way the manager wants to play, he's by far the best guy who can do that. And so once again, he's going to be a key cog. To your point, he's getting older. His performances are becoming more inconsistent. We saw that with Club this year, right? Like, it's not going to be perfect. If anyone's expecting him to be perfect through this entire Copa, you might be in for some bad news. Like, he's going to probably have some bad moments. But props to him. That Brazil game, he was phenomenal. And I hope we continue to get the best out of him here for at least another month.
Yeah, and it's honestly a rare circumstance, right? Tim Ream came into the cycle or to the fold so late, man. Most people don't become a national team starter at that age, right? I mean, he was completely overlooked in the Jurgen Klinsmann era, and obviously Bruce Arena's short stint, and then he was more of a focal point with Gregg Berhalter. I'm just scared, man, honestly, because Matt Turner has been inconsistent as the goalkeeper, right? Now, he had a great second half against Brazil, great second half. A lot of people say it's the best half or performance that we've seen from a goalkeeper since Tim Howard against Belgium, right? I don't know if I'd go that far, but I mean, it was pretty solid, right? I mean, Tim Howard's performance back then had me screaming and like, I was like absurd. I mean, I was going crazy. But, I just think when you have an inconsistent goalkeeper, you have an old center back, you have Chris Richards, who had a terrible performance, I believe, against Brazil. Vinny was, people were saying Vinny didn't have a good game. Sure, he didn't score, but Vinny was cooking Chris Richards. I mean, he was down the flank. Chris Richards didn't even have a chance. And that's the kind of guys we're going to be going against, not only in this tournament, but in the World Cup. You're not going to be going against scrubs in the World Cup. You're not going to get by, you're going to have to be able to defend these high level players. So, man, I don't know.
But to be fair, Will, like, if you left any center back in our pool on that island that Richards was left on with Vinny, you're going to get done 8 out of 10 times. Like, it's not a high percentage play. Like, maybe someone like Miles stops him one or two more times out of 10, but like, it's just not like, and so once again, we go back to the players versus tactics conversation, which is like, we can't, in those games, we can't be affording to leave center backs on islands with playmakers for these teams.
With world-class players, right?
You just can't. Like,
yeah.
You have to tactically be setting yourself up so that is like an absolute worst case scenario, not something that a team can easily counter into, right? Because Colombia easily countered into 3v3s. Brazil, for the first 30 minutes, was easily countering into 4-on-3s, 3-on-3s, situations that are just like number games in soccer, right? Like, 11v11 is hard. That's why a low block is hard to score against. 3v3 for elite players, that's light work, right? I mean, they're gonna toast that at a high percentage, and you're just kind of hoping to get lucky if you're like, well, we're gonna play Miles more because he's gonna do a little bit better, marginally better than one of our other center backs in this ISO situation. Well, it's like, if we're planning to leave our center backs in ISOs, we're in big trouble. And I don't care who we choose. So that's kind of where I stand on it, is like, we've got to be setting ourselves up more pragmatically when we get to these big games. We can't just be like, yes, we are going to go take the game to Uruguay and we are going to be pushing numbers forward all game. Like, that is not going to be great, and I'm not an advanced enough soccer tactician to tell you exactly the balance and exactly how we get it done. But I know that you watch teams who are very low in their block, right? And like basically never have possession, don't want it, right? That's what I'm expecting against Bolivia versus us. You have teams that are like, okay, we're going to kind of balance out. We're going to be in a block, but we're willing to possess a little bit. And then you have teams who are like, we are possessing and pushing forward. And if can counter us, cool. And USA at times is like playing in between number 2 and number 3, which to me is not the balance I want. I want to see us, especially against the Brazil, more in the 2, even to the 1 range at times, which is, to be fair, more what we did in the second half. I thought we were a little bit more sunk back, and our possession was a little bit more conservative. We weren't necessarily leaving ourselves as open.
No, exactly. And so I want to move on to the group, right? So we both believe we're going to get out of the group. Hopefully, if we don't, sound the alarm, pull the red lever, push the button, it's over, right?
Eject, yep, for sure.
So if we win, we're either going to we're going to play, depending on where we finish. I think we're probably going to finish probably second runner up in our group. I don't think Uruguay is going to lose a single match. If they do, I'd be very shocked. So we're either going to play Brazil, Colombia, Paraguay, or Costa Rica. I think it's going to either be Brazil or Colombia. We played both of them, right? Colombia blew the doors off of us. And I think that the Brazil game was an outlier. I don't think we played Brazil that game 10 times. That's what's going to happen. I think we got very lucky. I think Matt Turner, like I said, his performance really saved us. People like to say that, Allison saved them, which he did, right? Allison had a very good game for Brazil. But damn, Turner saved a lot of shots too. I mean, it could have been a high-scoring game in general. I don't think we're making it out of the quarterfinals.
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Like, the optimist and the fan in me really wants to believe that we can make, some sort of magical run. And a magical run would be semis, right? Because that would, really that would mean you beat one of those 2 teams, which would in and of itself would be the signature win that we're waiting for, and would be a statement, right? I think it would be a statement from Berhalter in this second tenure about kind of the direction that he's heading in. And I know it would only be 1 game, but that's kind of what I want. Honestly, Will, like, what I'm looking for, I know you said, like, nobody's expecting us to beat Uruguay. Like, no, but I am expecting us to beat someone in 6 years. And, like, if we're going to go through another, right, and I've kind of talked this scenario out with a lot of people where, like, okay, let's say we go through and we lose to Uruguay, and we don't get our doors blown off 2-1, 2-0, right? Something that's like not respectable, not 5-0. And then we go play Colombia and we do better, right? And we lose 2-1, and it's, decently hard fought and we're pretty competitive, which we should be with them. There's no reason for us to not be competitive, right? I'm not saying we're going to win, but like, we shouldn't be getting our doors blown off by anyone at this point in time. Honestly, we should be able to set up against anyone in the world and compete. And when I say compete, I just mean like, allow yourself an opportunity for, in soccer, I'd call it like the 1 in 5 when you're an underdog, right? The 1 in 5, if you set yourself up properly, the ball will fall your way and you'll get a win, right? Watch the Premier League. You see that all the time, right? Like, teams in the bottom of the table beat teams in the top 4 all the time because you set yourself up properly. And it's a dice roll at that point in a lot of ways, right? Like, XG does not mean goals, right? Like, a team can have 3 XG and you can have 0.5 and you can win 2-0. It happens all the time. And to me, that's all I want, is I want us to set ourselves up properly and give ourselves a chance. And I think there's a couple things that we can deduce if we don't get a win coming out of this Copa. Either 1, we've been set up improperly too often against good teams, or 2, Gregg's just like the most unlucky manager of all time that we haven't been able to like squeak any wins out. And like, you could probably argue both of those, right? But like, at the end of the day, I don't know if I want to leave up to chance whether or not, and it really would be in my eyes chance, whether or not which side of that spectrum we're falling on. Are we set up improperly, consistently? Are we just getting really unlucky? And for me, it would be like, we've got to try something else out. We've got a mini 2-year cycle leading into the biggest World Cup in this country's history. Like, are we really rolling the dice with a guy who in 6 years hasn't been able to really get that signature win against, a non-Mexico top tier team? Like, I don't know, man. Like, so yeah, but you're right. Quarterfinals, probably lose some sort of gritty game in a quarterfinal. But progress for us is we handle business against Bolivia and Panama. That does not mean 4 or 5-0 for a lot of unrealistic fans. That's not what it means to me. It just means like handled victories at home against two pretty bad teams where we don't need to stress that much, right? To me, that's taking care of business in any knockout competition like this in a group stage. You just, if you get a 4-0, cool. But like, I just want, okay, 2-0, 3-1, handle business. And then I want to compete against Uruguay. I want to compete against Brazil or Colombia. And I think you got to get one of those two. Has to be a win. It has to fall our way. And then at least for me, there's a little optimism of, okay, that's growth.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about like you said you're a little bit more optimistic. And I'm saying I'm expecting a lot of fans are expecting us to probably lose to Brazil or Colombia. I'm tired of feeling like that. I don't want to feel like that. Like that should be over. This isn't the U.S. men's national team of 20 years ago, right? Who was still competitive. We made to the semifinals in the 2002 World Cup or the quarterfinals. I'm sorry, the quarterfinals, which is crazy, right? This team is more talented than that team. I talked to Lexi about that. He's like, "Well, is it more talented? Yes, it's more talented. Look where these players are playing
Sure.
at. Yes, it's more talented, man. Come on. It's the coaching. The coaching's mediocre. Your coach is supposed to get more out of you, not make you. And I honestly believe Greg does make these players worse because we talked about it earlier. He's not putting them in positions to succeed. He's like conforming them and saying, you have to fit my system. Even if you don't fit, deal with it, right? Deal with it. Pepe, you're playing up top. Ballo, you're playing up top, even though Ferreira might be the better ideal player for that formation or system. But I'm tired of feeling like that, man. I want to see us beat a Brazil. I want to see us beat a Colombia, slay a giant. How are you supposed to be a giant if you're not beating some of these guys? You have to be able to beat them. And you said this is year 6 in the cycle, right? This is honestly embarrassing. This is what we have for 6 years. That's why a lot of people were pissed off when we hired Greg a year ago, rehired him because he's not forward thinking. He doesn't get anyone excited about taking this club or this a national team to a level it's never seen before. And in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, we made it to the semifinals, did we not?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So exact same format, exact same teams, or a couple different teams, but exact same giants, right? We made it to the quarterfinals. Isn't that sad? Or semifinals? Isn't that sad that 8 years later, more talent? Honestly, you could say some of these teams are down more than they were in 2016. Mexico's not better. Uruguay probably the same, I'd say. Brazil, a lot of people think this is one of the worst Brazil teams they've had in a while. The 2014 Brazil team was very good. I think finished like in fourth place in the World Cup. Colombia is decent. I would say we should be on the same level as Colombia. Like the fact we got dog walked, doors blown off 5-1. That's embarrassing because it should have not been like that.
We should. I get ragged on all the time by the South American, I think, kind of aficionado fans, but like we should absolutely be able to be somewhere in the same vicinity as Colombia. If you want to say that, they probably have a little bit more talent than us, like I think it's fair. But like, however, whichever way you cut it, if well managed, Team USA should be able to pull off pretty similar results to the Colombian national team. Like, I don't think that's, and I think that the expectations in a lot of ways of a lot of fans are lower because of what they've seen for the last 6 years. And a lot of fans, just for whatever reason, bias, whatever it is, like just the way that you think about sports is you think player first, player centric. A lot of people are like that, right? And it's like, well, and these are the people that after games say players didn't show up, players haven't been good enough, players aren't good enough. These guys, and to me, it's like, well, what I see in this pool is I see a group of now young still, but 22 to 25, 26, 27, mostly core guys coming into their core prime ages who are ready, man. Like you've got guys who are playing and starring at AC Milan, Fulham, in the Premier League, on and on, right? Juventus, right? People think Weston McKennie was one of Juventus's best players this year, which is a totally fair assessment, right? And those are Champions League quality teams in a lot of cases. And that's like, and you can keep going, man. Like Serginho Dest was, starting back on one of the best Dutch teams of all time in terms of results this year, right? Like and on and on. I don't want to sit here and go through every player. You guys know them all. Like there's just no way to look at and even the guys who you consider lower level are like good role players on mid-level teams, right? Like we've got guys who play in La Liga who can't even get onto the field here, right? Like so all of that. What I'm kind of wrapping that up to say here is like you've got this pool. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? For us, it really is. I hope it's not, but for me, it is because like as much as I loved those teams, I grew up on the '02 and '06 disappointment and '10 joy and ecstasy. Like I grew up on those teams, but like, and those ignited my love of soccer and my love of international soccer and club soccer internationally. And started playing FIFA and following and trying to learn everything I could. And back in those days, like FIFA was the number one way you could learn, right? And this wasn't on TV. It was like play FIFA and learn, play with the Milan midfield and with the Real Madrid midfield and Figo. And like that's how I learned who those guys are. And like, I looked at our players back then and I'm like, we're not really close. We never saw those guys really on the same field as the best players in the world. I hear people arguing, well, it was biased and they should have been. I don't see it, guys. I really don't. We had some middling, kind of lower level European players for the most part. We had our absolute stars. Listen, Josie absolutely flamed out of Europe. He just did. He wasn't good enough. Josie was a locked in starter for us. And yeah, you could argue that he was better than a lot of the nines we have right now in terms of performance. But at the end of the day, like, I want to see this group managed by somebody. I want to see this group managed by Bob Bradley. Hell, like I would take a lot of the managers we've had in the past and just see what is it like with somebody who I think is competent. Because I don't think we're competently managed consistently. It's very hit or miss. And without that, you can't expect to come into a competition like this, to go pessimistic on you now. You can't expect to come into a competition like this and make it out of the quarterfinals. To go back optimistic, can we beat Uruguay if set up properly? Yes. Can we beat Colombia, or Brazil if set up properly? It's a dice roll, but it can happen. We've seen it happen, right? It would take luck. And the biggest thing going for us in that quarterfinal is that, and a lot of people don't know this, there is no extra time. And when you're the underdog, that helps you a lot. We're going to go right from 90th minute to PKs, right? And so if you have that result that we had against Brazil, which you may or may not call a little lucky, that's fine. We go to PKs. That's the best possible outcome for us. Playing 30 minutes of soccer against Brazil is not the best possible outcome. So there is a shot, right? There's a shot to do it, but you've got to have everybody rowing in the same direction. The manager has to be, absolutely hitting every single mark to make this kind of thing happen. And we'll see if it does pretty soon here.
Yeah. And, honestly, I know he catches a lot of grief, right? And he definitely had his flaws, but one man who really, the more time passes by, you start to reflect on him in a positive light. Jurgen Klinsmann. Yeah. And you know why? Because even for his flaws, he got players to exceed their talents. Look at that 2014 World Cup starting 11. Look how many MLS players were on that team. You had Kyle Beckerman, you had Matt Beasler. Now, Clint Dempsey obviously had came to MLS the year before, but you had Michael Bradley. All these players were playing in MLS, and some of them were MLS lifers. Okay? You cannot tell me this team isn't more talented. And that's like the direct comparison. You look at just think about this, Adam. What if Gregg Berhalter was coaching that 2014 roster? They wouldn't have made it out of the group stage. They would have lost to Portugal. They would have lost to Germany, and they sure as hell would have lost to Ghana. They would not have made it out of that brutal stage.
I don't see it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the compare and contrast you can directly do. Now, imagine if Jurgen Klinsmann was managing this team. Obviously, it was 10 years ago. Lots changed. But what I'm saying is, I feel like even though Jurgen got a lot of grief, he's the reason we're here right now. He's the one who built the foundation to get all these players over to Europe to build their careers. He took these MLS players because that was the best we had at the time. A lot, in most circumstances. I mean, for God's sake, man, we had Wondolowski on the bench. He wouldn't even sniff a national team right now. I don't care if he's scoring 25 goals in MLS in a season. He's not coming anywhere close to this team. Now we got players that are playing for Monaco. We got players that are playing for PSV. We got players that are playing in the championship. Obviously, championship's the second division. It's better than MLS, right? Like you said, we got players at Juve, Milan. I mean, this team has got talent. That's not an excuse anymore. This team has talent. Anyone who says that the 2014 team is just as talented is lying to themselves, and they're completely coping, right? That team is not. But that team did make it pretty equally far in the World Cup. And so that's the sad part. And it leads me to my next question. What does Gregg Berhalter have to do in this tournament to guarantee he gets to coach us through the 2026 cycle?
So am I in charge of US soccer
Yeah,
or the current people?
you're in charge,
All
man.
right,
Yeah,
I'm in charge.
you're in charge.
No. Well,
Breaking news.
if I'm in charge, I'm pulling like I'm pulling a Morocco, and he's out today, and BJ's taking over because I just don't believe in him. But no, um, he, you know, he would need. It's kind of hard, right? Because I have bias, just in terms of I have years of watching and analyzing. And my history with Berhalter is this: when he came in, a lot of people really hated on him in 2019, right? A lot of the current community wasn't as active back then, but I was on my old coaching basketball Twitter account where I used to, do some soccer stuff too. But I was, following and watching, and the same account, some of the same accounts today that hate Berhalter were hating on him then. I was on the opposite side of the fence. I was like, listen, it's a new manager, guys. It's a new group. This team just didn't qualify for the World Cup. Let's give him a year. We got to give him 2 years here to figure this out. And so it's funny, like I went from arguing that, and even 2020, we came back and it was all kind of meaningless friendlies against terrible teams. But I was like, okay, I see what he's trying to build. Let's see. Can he get this done? There was some stuff I didn't necessarily agree with. The way he, I think, utilized and kind of continued to deploy Sebastian Lletget long after he clearly had kind of run its course. There's a lot of stuff like that, right? He played guys for way too long. They clearly had run their course. I saw that. I heard the critiques, but I was like, guys, let's give him a chance. And it was really the World Cup qualification cycle, which a lot of people would say, hey, we qualified, did the job, success. And that holistic process and watching him manage that and trying to, think about it a little bit more tactically in terms of how does he consistently set us up? Is it the right way to set up against an opponent? What are the hard things here? The hard things are winning on the road, right? And that is hard in CONCACAF, right? And people make jokes about that. Okay, how's he going to do in those games? Those are the ones that matter the most to me. We're better than all these freaking teams. And he continually underperformed on the road. And it was like, man, like every big challenge that we put in front of the manager, we seem to shrink to, right? And it seems to be a holistic shrinking, which in my coaching experience, holistic shrinking, whole team shrinking from moments is a sign that they're not prepared. They've turned against the coach and turned on each other, right? Or everybody's lazy on one day, right? Or they're tired for some reason. We did travel wrong. We had too many games and so you get bad performances by whole teams sometimes. Very rarely is it all the players just didn't show up. There's some why. And what I consistently saw is I thought we were, not utilizing the right guys. I mean, there's a ton of reasons, not subbing at the right times, not set up tactically in the right way against the right opponent. And that stuff turned me against the coach because I was like, man, I'm not seeing it. I just don't see the vision. I get it, soccer, and you're not going to win every game, but I'm just not seeing performances that are commensurate with believing that this guy can lead us to where we want to go. And then the World Cup happened, and it's like, okay, World Cup, the England game set up really nicely, got the result we wanted. Pretty much everything else in that was just meh to me. And the Netherlands game was like a big negative, right? Like winning 1-0 against Iraq, it's like, okay, or Iran is like, okay, cool. 1-1 against Wales, there's nothing that was like, wow, right? And once again, to Tack's point, you referenced, the wow was like a draw. I don't know. And so now here we are, right? Where it's like, to me, there's almost nothing he can do to keep the job. If somebody gave me the U.S. soccer job tomorrow, I'm going in a different direction. If I take Crocker's job tomorrow, I mean, it would have to be like showing out, winning the group, beating Uruguay, right? Going into a game against a Colombia or a Brazil and finding a way to win that game. Or if you lose, it's like, man, we played neck and neck with them. That's it, right? It's like convincingly winning the group, and then either beating a Colombia or Brazil or playing right with them for me to go, wow, yep, okay, that's enough equity for me to say, yep, let's invest more. You're proving that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like to a certain degree, they've kind of downplayed expectations. So that way, if they do fail, you're not as up in arms and like, oh yeah, let's get him out of here.
For
Let's fire
sure.
him. Yeah, like I'm telling you, any person who has been watching this national team like you have for so long, and I have for probably 15 years, we know where we should be at this point with the talent we have. We should be making the semifinals. That should be guaranteed at this point. Okay, that should be guaranteed. I don't care if we're playing Brazil, Colombia, Paraguay, Costa Rica, whoever we're playing in the second round or the quarterfinals, right? We should be beating them at this point, or competing and looking really good. You brought up that Colombia game again about how we should be neck and neck with them. Like, you're not saying we beat them, but we should be probably on level playing field with them, right? That game shouldn't have been 5-1. That game should have been 3-2 or 2-1 or something like
Right.
that. Should have never been 5-1. Should have been neck and neck where you thought this could go either way all game long. And honestly, I think we're going to end up probably playing Brazil because I don't think we're going to win our group stage. And I think they're going to win unless Colombia just goes on
Yeah.
some crazy run.
That's a good point, though, too. Like, Colombia hasn't lost in 22 games or something like that. And Brazil, it hasn't looked good. Like, it's kind of 50-50, right? I think the presumption is your second you play Brazil, but I could see it going the other way so easily, right? So that's going to be interesting. Who do we play if we're second, right? And I almost feel like we luck out if we play Colombia. I really do, because I still just think Brazil highly motivated in a quarterfinal just seems way scarier than Colombia highly motivated in a quarterfinal. It just does. Like, feels like we could squeak a result against Colombia still, even with what we just saw, which is crazy to think about. Like, whoa, we just 1-1 Brazil and 5-1 against Colombia. I still think I want Colombia, and I just want to set up a little bit more pragmatically. I don't want to go take the game to them. Like, I don't care about changing the way the world views American soccer. You know what'll change the way the world views American soccer? Like, get results more consistently.
Winning.
That's
Yeah,
it.
winning
Like
everything. Yeah.
Like a cool possession stretch of 12 passes that leads to an Allison save, which was really beautiful, by the way. That's not going to change the way the world views American soccer, because if that's how you're trying to beat Brazil, you're going to lose 3-1 most nights. Like, you're going to lose 4-2 most nights. Like, you're not going to get that kind of finishing performance from Brazil, that often. Like, we kind of lucked out that they hit those shots in the vicinity of Turner, like, as a goalie, oftentimes your best saves are because somebody hit a pretty bad shot. It's like, oh, that guy did not hit that shot well enough to score, and I was able to actually get to it.
I actually have a crazy prediction. I've not said this out loud, but I think this is what's going to happen. I believe, honestly, and you know this from other sports, sometimes it's not about the talent. Sometimes it's about the form, right? How are you playing right now? We've seen many teams lose that are better teams on paper, but the other team was hotter at the time. Who's to say Colombia is not this year's Chile? 2016, they won. Nobody thought they were going to win it in 2016, but they did.
For sure.
What if Colombia does that this year? They could, right? I mean, they definitely could. I mean, they got a pretty favorable setup. I mean, I think they definitely can win their group. They'll probably play us. They will probably beat us. Let's be honest. I agree with you. I like our chances better against them, because when you're the hot team, that means you can get cold. And, then you're more on level playing field. Brazil's just got a lot of talent on paper, and it's scary. You just don't know what you're going to get. But they could have an easy run to the final, man, and ended up playing Argentina, which is probably who they're going to play. I don't think Ecuador, Mexico, or Jamaica or any of them are going to make a run to the final. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that, like I said, I've been saying Gregg Berhalter's got to make the semifinals to keep his job. We both probably would agree that even if he doesn't, that's probably not going to matter to them. He's probably safe no matter what, unless he just gets grouped, which is probably not going to happen.
Hey, can I play out? I was doing this with a friend earlier this week. Can I play out the perfect scenario for you? One of my buddies who follows soccer, like, intermittently, kind of gets up for the big kind of moments. He's not following the friendlies, but Copa's this summer, and he's like, "Hey, I'm watching Copa. What should I watch for?" He knows I'm really intense. He's like, I kind of say a lot of this stuff. I'm like, honestly, if I'm a betting man, this is what I think is going to happen. He's like, well, give me the perfect scenario. How do the chips fall exactly in the right, order so that US can win? And the chips can't fall in the order that we need to play Brazil and Colombia in the semis or quarters and semis. They can't. We're not going to beat them both, right? You can get lucky one of the games. So here's how the chips fall. One, we beat Uruguay in the group stage, right? Which is possible. They're really good, and Bielsa's really good, but it's possible to beat them, right? We play in a way that we can make it a close game, and we get a win and we win the group, right? Or we get a tie and we win the group on goal differential, whatever you want to say, right? Then, and in all of these, you can go back in the history of, any sort of competition like this, there are upsets in the group stage. There just are. And to me, this is what has to happen. We are second in the group, or we're first in the group. We win the group, and Colombia gets upset by Paraguay, Costa Rica, and they get grouped, right? It's not likely. I know. I'm not saying this is what I think is going to happen. This is the path, though. Now we're playing Paraguay in the quarters. We beat Paraguay, and then Uruguay beats Brazil. Totally possible. I think they just did it a couple months back. Then we get to play Uruguay again in the semis, which is a way better matchup for us. And we beat Uruguay in the semis. And on the other side, somehow Argentina, I don't even care who you're going to pick, somehow Argentina doesn't make the final, right? Because like the things I know is like we're not beating, in my scenario, I've got us beating Uruguay twice. We're not beating Uruguay twice and Argentina. I just don't see it. We're also not beating Brazil and Colombia. That's just not happening in the quarter. I just don't believe we're going to get 2 in a row. So we need to somehow avoid having to win 2 games in a row against giants, right? In this competition, the Big Four. So that's it. That's the path. It would be a really lucky path. It would be a very like Boston Celtics in the playoffs this year, right back there, NBA champs as of 2 days ago, yesterday. When was that?
2 days ago. Yeah.
2 days ago. Yeah. It feels like yesterday because I've been so hyped about it, but that's it. That's the path you get, or the England path in the World Cup when they made the semis a couple years ago. So so that's it. If anybody out there wants to be optimistic, we're rooting hard for Colombia to lose to Paraguay or Costa Rica. And then, we need some dominoes to fall for us.
The magic. We gotta walk the tightrope, right? Yeah. Well,
please don't bet on that, guys. That is not betting advice. If any of you have FanDuel accounts, like,
I don't know, man, they might make a lot of money if it hits.
You could, yeah, you for sure could, but you're probably losing your money.
Well, Adam, I appreciate it, man. This has been fun. We'll have to see what happens, right? First game is the 23rd. We'll definitely have you back on afterwards to either celebrate or vent and cope and talk about where the hell we go next. But man, I appreciate you coming on. Where can people follow you at?
On X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, Stan USMNT. At Stan USMNT is the handle. You check me there, tweeting randomly, and feel free to reply. Just don't be a D-bag, and I love debating even with guys who have totally opposite opinions as me.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have you on again soon sometime after this tournament.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it.